where not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.
Friday Java from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The date for this episode is the 8th of November 2019. We're already through the month of we're moving into the month of November, I should say, which is the 11th month of the year. We have been moving very quickly. I was just thinking about the pace of politics and the pace of global and urban news events in the political world, the social world, the economic world. They're coming much more quickly now, and what it has caused us to do at WBRN Radio is rechange some of our schedules and rethink some of our programs because we are, as they say, not overstaffed, to say the least. And of course, as news director, I wear many hats here. In the days that Jerry Pippin was with us, Jerry did a lot of the work, probably 60 to 70% of the work. And we also had other people that were along for the ride. And now it is down to using some source people, such as the University of Virginia at Charlottesville and various other commentators, and we comment on them, or piggyback on them, or money more to quarterback them, or bring the information here, relying on the pages of various newspapers, the People's World, that is a People's newspaper, the LA Times on the West Coast, the paper at Santa Cruz, the Washington Post, of course, it's a national newspaper, the New York Times, and AP Wire Service, a lot of AP news we get. We go to the paper in Birmingham, Alabama, on the Alabama primary down there, and in Kentucky, the Herald, the Herald there in Louisville, and the Herald Leader in Frankfurt, a more progressive newspaper in the state of Kentucky. KentuckyCourse.com is what it is under. We do go to those primary sources, and we look at the local races. We've been monitoring the race in Kentucky. Now in Mississippi. Now in Mississippi, the current leader there, Beauregard, is now officially back in the race. If you recall him, Beauregard Sessions, he went out of the Senate to be the Attorney General under D.J. Trump. D.J. Trump basically used him as a punching bag, and now he's still endorsing D.J. Trump. He resigned as the Attorney General there, and the argument was around he did not recuse himself in the matter of the 2000, not too many infinitives here, the matter of the 2016 election, which would be investigated by the FBI there under the former director of the FBI, a Republican named Robert Mueller. Nonetheless, that episode comes back in, and on the other side you still have Roy Moore. Roy Moore is still there. And if we look to the presidential landscape, Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York that caused much controversy in the city of New York, was partial to the Rudolph Giuliani. Rudolph Giuliani had been the U.S. Attorney in New York and a fixture there, and then, of course, later the mayor of New York City, and then came Bloomberg. And we remember stop and frisk, those acts against people of color, and specifically followers of O.J. Simpson, African Americans, Latinos, who make up a majority of the population of the city of New York. Now we have much more progressive leadership in the city of New York, the city council in New York City. One of the reasons D.J. Trump is fleeing to Florida. Yeah, it hasn't been mentioned in the press, but he is giving up his citizenship in the Empire State to move to the Sunshine State, so to speak. A lot of that is political. The laws governing his financial empire and his personal empire in Florida are lots different. The judicial system in Florida is more friendly to businesses due to the enormous amount of gerrymandering there in the state of Florida. Also, it's a much cheaper economy there. Some of it's still based on the old plantation system. And if you look in Mississippi, you still got an old archaic system in the state of Mississippi. One of the reasons there that the state's Attorney General, Mr. Hood, could not win in Mississippi, and the reason, of course, for that is quite obvious. The white supremacist vote there did him in, literally. Trump went there, and Trump talked about our values, etc., dividing the nation up between progressive forces in the nation and the reactionary forces in Mississippi. He talked about the values, and any clown knows the values there are not the values of Goodman and Cheney and Stirner. They are the values of legendary Southern heroes like Bull Connor in Mississippi, of Eastland and that pack of characters that are actually more to the right than old Senator Eastland was. They were within the Democratic Party. They had cooperated somewhat with the New Deal to get money to the barely needed money to the state of Mississippi. We have an article here in our Mississippi package on what happened to the, I think we'll do it tomorrow night, but nonetheless, 1.3 million, I don't have my cheat sheet here, it cost on that infamous 600 plus raid there in Mississippi. And various, this was testimony before the, I believe, Homeland Security Commission there, Mr. Thompson, of the Congress type from Mississippi, is chair of one of the principal people. I believe he's the chair of the committee. We'll get the Mississippi part out, and we'll look at Mississippi and where Mississippi is and where Mississippi is going. the Parliament in the UK, kind of skipping back a little bit here, but Parliament UK is on recess. They're going into an election in early December, which is roughly about a month away, a little less than a month. That's how quickly they have elections in the UK. We'll continue to cover the UK on our BR on the World. That's our international channel. You haven't heard much from us over there, but give us some time. We'll get it done. We still have the 2019 World Series, and that has finally culminated this week with the appearance of some of the Nationals at the White House. There was a lot of controversy involving some of the personnel on the Nationals. Suzuki was one. He was the catcher. He was hurt and did not participate in some of the later games of the World Series. I don't think he was in any of the games. I listened to all of those games. Anyway, we'll check the record on that, and that'll be in all about sports. And also, we look at California, the wildfires. They've sort of decreased in intensity there in California. We'll get an update from the Los Angeles Times on what is happening in California. And also a troubling event that it comes out of Las Vegas, the Journal Review. That is a newspaper in Las Vegas, Nevada, and the state of homelessness being criminalized there. We'll get that package in today, and Bernie Sanders even weighed in on it. And on a numbers man, that is our macroeconomics program, we'll talk a little bit about Elizabeth Warren's program, Medicare for All, and some of the economists that signed the letter of some initial support saying basically that it could be done. One is Dr. Mark Zanti. He's the head economist at Moody's Analytics, used to be at economics.com, one of the best economists in the nation, period. He was also the economic advisor to the late John McCain, Senator John McCain. And some comments by him, and we'll start to explore a little bit deeper into that, but it takes a lot of research time to do even a decent job of it, and we'll see what we can get done on it. Medicare for All, 100 and I believe 60 million people now have private insurance. Many more have insurance that's subsidized under Medicaid, or they have Medicare. There's also Medicare Advantage. I notice we've been getting some letters from Medicare Advantage providers and what they provide. But we caution senior citizens to read the fine print, because original Medicare, depending on the individual, the patient, and medical needs, do in fact cover more things, generally speaking, there. Now, such things as eye exams and those kinds of things, some of the Medicare Advantage policies, but that's specific to states, do cover those incidents, or you buy a supplemental along with your original Medicare, depending on which. I think that's what Carla does with your situation there. So let's take some diving here, and we'll look at some polls from the week. We usually do more of that on the week that was, is tomorrow night. But we'll get with the people at the University of Virginia, and this is Sabato's crystal ball. And let me get my crystal glasses out here. And this again is by J. Miles Coben here, and also Kyle Klondike. On the 7th of November, we always pay homage to Heather Heyer, who was killed literally in downtown Charlottesville by white supremacists and supporters of the Trump administration. Here's the key takeaways. Virginia moves from lean Democrat to likely Democrat in their electoral college rating. I think that is a prudent rating at this point in time. Virginia has been in a transitioning from, and you saw the transition started with the election of its first African American governor there in Richmond. Since I should say, the radical Republicans were in control in the Senate, and we had that period there that African Americans across not only Virginia but in the South as a whole were elected to Congress and were in the Senate, and etc. But Douglas Wilder was his name. That started the trend in Virginia. Now, there have been other governors there that are in the Senate now, and various other places. As I said, the Warner, we can think of him. There was old McDonald in the sort of in between there as a governor. He ended up in prison, and he's largely forgotten. So this is not unusual. They say likely Democrat there. Things that can change, but they're trending in the other direction. If you notice, DJ Trump kept his butt out of Virginia. That was one state he did not go to. And one has to understand that in Richmond, that is where where Lee had his headquarters, and that was where the South was. In Virginia, not very far. Now you look at Virginia, Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. itself is in the South, and then you get into Maryland and Baltimore. Anyway, we'll get this. Hillary Clinton won Virginia by 5 points, and that was about 1 to 2 points, depending on which poll you perused, out of the margin of error, while winning the national popular vote by 2 and losing the Electoral College. This is the most Democratic state had voted for president relative to the nation since FDR. The following year, Democrats held 3 statewide offices by surprising large margins, made an eye-popping gain of 15 net seats in the state House of Delegates, and coming up for a draw, it actually was broken by a coin in the body. Democrats needed 3 U.S. House seats. Senator Tim Kaine was reelected easily. Then on Tuesday nights, Democrat netted what appears to be a half dozen seats in the state House and 2 in the state Senate to win control of the state government there in Richmond. Are you sensing a theme? We are. Well, yeah, it happens over time. What has changed in Virginia, you have, is in many states. You compare part of it to Mississippi. Rural Virginia is still rural Virginia there, and Virginia was trending Democrat even before DJ Trump, no doubt about that. And if you look at the urban areas, Northern Virginia, greater Richmond area, Hampton Road, since Trump's arrival on the scene, the state's Democratic trend has continued as the once Republican suburban areas have moved forward to the left of center. Very important situation there, and we'll speak a little bit about what Bloomberg is attempting to do with his entrance in. There's been a lot of debate this week in election circles around presidential elections. Now, of course, 1 year away, that is folly. 2 respected polls, the New York Times Upshoot and Senior College. Trump's locked in a close race against top Democrats, lunchbox Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Liz Warren, with Sanders performing the best against Trump and Warren the worst. Well, that could all change. The ABC Washington Post poll, meanwhile, shows all 3 Democrats trouncing Trump with leads ranging from 14 to 17. That's more of an outliner there. But we do feel fairly confident saying is that Trump is clearly on the dog to win the popular vote, if not the Electoral College. Well, this is changing and could change again. We're moving the state forward towards the Democrats for president, shifting it from lean Democrat to likely Democrat. This is Virginia now. Democrats end up doing better in the state House, but delegates in the state Senate, although a lot of this was because close races broke towards the Republicans in the Senate, but towards the Democrats in the House. It appears that Democrats won only 21 of 40 seats in the Senate, creating a narrow majority, but they picked up 2 where there were nearly 10 points apiece. No Democrat incumbent was seriously threatened. Meanwhile, Republicans held on to 4 of the 19 seats they apparently won by margins ranging from less than a point to 4.5. Now, 4.5 is a little bit, that's about 1.5 out of the margin of error. Now, the margin of error can go plus or minus 3.5 in many of these polls. Speaking of redistricting, the newly empowered Democrats now face a test on that question. Last year, the Republican-controlled General Assembly passed the first reading of a proposed state constitution amendment that would establish an independent redistricting commission. The new Democratic-controlled General Assembly will have to decide whether to pass it a second time, which would trigger a statewide vote on the commission next November, or scatter it and exercise gerrymandering power themselves in 2021, who have nationally called for nonpartisan redistricting as a response to aggressive Republican gerrymandering. Richmond will be a hotbed of activity next year as legislators descend on the former capital of the Confederacy, which they still has statues, etc. If Virginia is truly in play for the president next year, something has gone wrong for the Democrats. Now, to Blevin and in the state of Kentucky. We've been covering the state of Kentucky for a number of years now. Every summer we cover Fancy Farm. This time we had to get Fancy Farm after the act, but we normally cover Fancy Farm either afoot or we cover the live stream, one of the two. And that is the annual political conclave down in the Catholic parish there, St. Jerome. We're going to give a shout out, as they say, to St. Jerome, and wish everyone in St. Jerome Parish happy Thanksgiving and a happy Christmas. Anyway, breaking the state down in congressional Democrats, Blevin, who is the governor there. Now, Blevin was there, he's been there a number of times, but he was there once running as an independent against the old man McConnell. And he was skipping a different rope at that time, an opportunist, no doubt, and not very well liked person. My take on him, at least from a personal perspective, that at one time he was amiable, but again, people do change, or they change back. Anyway, the total is 49.2% to 48.8%. There is Andy Beshear. Andy Beshear is the son of the former governor of Kentucky. Get that right in a minute here. That was twice elected there. Governor Beshear being a progressive there, and he was able to establish Kentucky Connect, which was their site there in Virginia as part of Obamacare. Very progressive situation. Anyway, nonetheless, ancestral Democratic counties in eastern Kentucky vying with big margins in, and they always have to do this, in Louisville, Lexington, and a good showing in northern Virginia, which features the suburbs of Cincinnati. Many of the, Cincinnati is incidentally the city of Cincinnati, have been moving across the Rhine. Remember, Jerry Pippen and I covered the murder of Timothy, I forget his last name right now, but anyway, he sparked a rebellion in the city of Cincinnati. There, he was murdered by the police, and people would go over that bridge. They call it over the Rhine. You can see the German ancestry of the city of Cincinnati. A lot of people moved over there as Cincinnati became a more middle of the road, so to speak. In other words, the proverbial needle was moving central and a little bit to the left, not that much, but enough to push these people into Kentucky. I remember this one right-wing pundit moved over from Cincinnati into Kentucky, and the last I heard of him, not named, not to be mentioned, he's now in Arizona. Yeah, I guess I don't know where his next stop will be. But anyway, flagged Campbell County in northern Kentucky is a must-win for Beshear. He won it by 5 points. He carried its neighbor Kenton as well. Beshear cobbled together enough a coalition of old Democratic areas, old school types, and newer ones to beat Blevin, arguably, last time I looked, by about 5,000 votes or more. Breaking down these legislative districts here, we'll have an independent production on this, where changes were there. This is the 2015 to 2019 gubernatorial changes by congressional districts. In the first congressional district, the change there was a negative .15. And in the second district, 7.5 there. And we look at for the Democrats in the third district, 15.9, and in the fourth district, 13.6, and in the fifth district, 5.2 and 11.1. Now, this is from a 4-year span here as to where they were going in this. Anyway, if we look further at this, Jack Conway carried it handsomely. This is it was in 2015, 21.5. This week, Beshear took up an outright punishing 37.4. Now, remember when he was the Attorney General, breaking down the Louisville-based 3rd District where both candidates hailed from, saw the largest swing to Beshear. You would expect that in Louisville, that area, the birthplace of the late Muhammad Ali. Districts 2, 4, and 6, all anchored in Metro Bowling Green. That is where their senator is from there, and Cincinnati and Lexington respectively, but all in broad taking rural SWATs. They all swung at least 5 percentage to Beshear. Blevins showing in Kentucky 6 may be his most embarrassing. President Trump campaigned there the night before, and the district only moved 11 points more Democratic than the overall state shift. So it didn't do him any good. DJ Trump's appearance there outside of the major bluegrass state metros to rural districts saw a divergence in western Kentucky. The governor slightly improved in District 1. Interesting, this seat was held by James Comer, who nearly beat Blevins in 2015 gubernatorial primary because of his strength in this region. The early cycle, Coomer, considered running for rematch. In hindsight, had he followed through and won the primary, he would have been a much clear favor to keep the governor's chair red. In Kentucky 1 is 63% rural by composition, is exactly the type of area that has shifted right within the Trump era. In a vacuum, the Appalachian K5 would have been susceptible to the same trend. However, the state representative Rocky Akins there, who hails from that region, likely proved to be an effective surrogate for Beshear in the rural area. The region also has clear ancestral pockets for Democrats. Blevins performed weakly in this area in his primary, a warning sign that manifested itself in the general election. The race had proved very close, but most expected Kentucky's Republicanism to carry, as DJ Trump said, to push Blevins across, I hope I pronounced his name right, across the finishing line, but he couldn't drag his way out of a hole he dug for himself through his abusive personality and battles with key constituencies, mainly the teachers, Denny men, and teachers are well respected in Kentucky. Those interpreting Beshear's victory as a major warning sign for the old man McConnell need to reckon with what happened in these other areas, as well as factors that McConnell will be running as a federal incumbent, not on the state level, but he will be sharing the ballot, of course, with DJ Trump. In the end, Blevins' nationalization message in the closing days of the campaign couldn't quite get him in a second term. A Republican running statewide in Kentucky these days has to try to lose. Blevins tried for 4 years and succeeded. Anyway, on to Mississippi. We won't spend a lot of time there. Character named Tate Reeves ran against the Attorney General Jim Hood, who had been elected 4 times. out of the Tupelo area there, and those extra burbs in, Hood posted modest gains in Metro Jacksonville along the Gulf Coast, but couldn't match Espy's numbers. This is Mike Espy, former Ag Commissioner, former Congress type, and African American there in the heavy African American Delta are near the Memphis extra burbs. Hood most acute improvement came in his home region, that northeast of the area that cast relatively few votes, and Hood himself took on to 25% in most counties. Reagan rallied the northeast last week, and here's the evidence is better for the president's argument that he helped the party as opposed to what happened in Lexington, Kentucky. In order to make up the Espy deficit, he needed to improve on his showing in more places than he did. No doubt about that. Did not occur for him. The Smith, she got 53.6% of the vote, and Mike Espy got 46.4%, and Reeves was able to get 52% less than Heinz Smith, and Hood 46.62 percentage more than Espy. If there's a color line there, it could have been a slight one. But much improvement organizing need to do well. And go to Philadelphia here, and not a lot. It'll be in Jersey. In South Jersey also captured the Trump-won district, 2 assembly seats, while the Jersey as a whole is trending Democratic. You have to remember that a lot of people affiliated with the stock market and with the financial industry live in Jersey. And Wagner, she's out of Missouri, who had a tough race than she is accustomed to in 2018. Missouri itself moved towards the Republicans, but again, we're seeing some signs of weaknesses in suburban areas. That would be around St. Louis, Kansas City, that area. Congratulations to our friend there, Mr. Aldridge, Lamont Aldridge, young man, 25 years old, is now in the House in the state of Missouri. He's worked at the records department. He was active in the Ferguson matter, marched, etc., and very active there, and also was on the commission there in Ferguson there. So we shout out to Mr. Aldridge. Anyway, he's on our Facebook page, so we have to shout out to him. Now let's go here and see if we can get... I think we pretty much covered what the Courier Journal would have for us. Don't want to miss out on too many things here. Republicans here, one of the things to remember is Joe McGrath wrote an article here. Matt Bevin lost because he was a jerk, and good riddance of him. Anyway, now he's on a recanvassing effort. That's Matt Bevin, that is. But Missouri doesn't really have Missouri. Kentucky really doesn't have a clear shot there. There's an old archaic law. We're getting to that on our special broadcast, and we'll be able to talk more about what happened there. And I'm not sure. Well, we don't really need to bring that up. Let's move on now. We'll get that on the special broadcast. We have a panel here shaping up. We won't go to that. Incidentally, our program, the Numbers Man program, will of course be coming up. To the Los Angeles Times here. There's an article here before we go to the Washington Post part of this. Amazon spent a big to defeat Socialist City Council member in Seattle. We used to live in there anyway, nonetheless. The incumbent there, Shamar Swawanta, There's a socialist there, the councilman there, Kwashama Shawida, may be the most powerful local foe of the private employer Amazon. She passed the 15-hour minimum wage law that cost the company dearly. She's also starting support of an ordinance to force companies to pay a $275 per employee annual head tax to the city for homeless. The council passed that too, but then it repealed it a month later. To the light of her left-wing base, Sawat cast one of two dissenting votes and called Jeff Bezos our enemy. The company is supporting the business-friendly candidate. That has been one of the problems in Seattle, these business-friendly candidates who holds a narrow lead as vote counting continued. That was on Thursday. Voting is still, that's happened before, that we've had candidates in Seattle fall behind, and then as the votes come in, voting ended Tuesday, but counting all the mail-in ballots could take a few other days. About half the expected ballots counted. Oren, small business advocate, and he also is in the LGBTQ community leader. It was at 51%. Solvent is at 49%, clawing back 3 percentage points since the initial count. In 2013, Solvent overcame a 7-point initial margin to win her first term. Now, this is a little unusual in recounts. Usually this does not happen. We've been involved in many recounts. Amazon, which employs 50,000 people in the Seattle metro and pours a $1.5 million into the city council races through a political action front group, no doubt, managed by the Metro Chamber of Commerce. Is a larger chunk than was the largest chunk, $4 million. This shows you what it can do. The Seattle Times described Amazon's spending as a money bomb. Its impact remains to be seen. One possibility is that spending backfired and stirred sympathy for the target candidates. Even Oren said his election night party that he was frustrated by completely unnecessary corporate donations, which he was a recipient of. Starbucks, another city corporation giant, exercised more subtle influence, donating far less money while voicing support for change on the 9-member commission. Joni Balter, a Seattle political analyst, on a Monday, employees stood in front of outlets handing out free coffee in paper cups marked vote November the 5th. Oh boy. And they show a Starbucks worker handing out free coffee, small cups. Imagine Lisa Fedino out in San Francisco. Think about this. This didn't make it completely about money, made it about coffee and vote for change. Batter said it was far more dip kind of a PR move. Well, anyway, Amazon is viewed warmly by many Seattle residents who see the giant corporation as a force behind the city's rising cost of living. No doubt about that. Income inequality. The scale of the company's sudden interest in local politics, unprecedented, giving its contributions of about 130,000 to city council members. That was in 2015, with scorching rhetoric and a doctorate in economics. Sworn to frequently slam big business and its local and global influence, denouncing corporate greed and the two-party system. In 2013, she campaigned on a pledge to raise the minimum wage, which she did, and she beat a 4-term council member named Richard Conlon. She also was the mover behind Seattle being the first big city to get to a $15 minimum, which Amazon extended to all of its workers nationwide. The head tax initiative she helped lead in 2017 would have cost Amazon $10 million a year, which is like 10,000. As the legislation progressed, Amazon managers said they would halt plans for a new downtown building, reconsidering another one under construction and jeopardizing 7,000 jobs, which would not have benefited the people of. That's one thing to remember, would have not benefited the people there. She endured humiliation as swatted when a rally she held outside of the campaign headquarters was trashed by iron workers in hard hats who drowned her out shouting, "No head tax, no head tax." Well, the iron workers would do this, but unfortunately that is labor opportunism. Those jobs are relatively short. They can last up to 2 years, but when they disappear, where are they going to build the next building? Anyway, Swanet said we are going to continue to fight to make sure every vote of the disenfranchised people get counted. And that is in Seattle, Washington. Now let's move along here. Again, this is the LA Times. This is 53 million Americans stuck in low-wage jobs. The road out is hard. There's no doubt about that. Shows a picture of workers here. And this is from the Bloomberg News. Workers marched through LA last month for better wages and benefits. Unemployment is hovering near a 50-year low. The workforce participation rate is high. And 44% of Americans 18 to 64 are low-wage workers. And with few prospects improving their lot. That's according to a Brookings Institute. We'll have this on numbers, man. We'll dive a little bit deeper here. But as estimated, 53 million Americans are earning low wages. According to the study, the number is more than twice the number of people in the 10 most populous U.S. cities combined. The minimum wage for those workers is $10.22 an hour. Their annual pay is $17,950. Although many are benefiting from higher demand for labor, the data indicates that not all the new jobs are good or high-paying positions. The definition of low wage differs from place to place. The office defined it as those who earn less than two-thirds of the minimum wage for full-time workers, adjusted for regional cost of living. Instance of worker would be considered in Beckley, West Virginia, low with income of $12.54 or less. In San Jose with income of $20 an hour, $20.02 to be precise. We have the largest and longest expansion job growth in modern history. And this is Marcela Escobar. She's the author of this survey. The expansion is showing up in various ways in many places. The millions of Americans in low-wage jobs are likely to stay there. Workers who make between $10 and $15 an hour have a 52% chance of remaining in that bracket when they switch. Middle-wage workers who earn from 19 to 24 an hour, there's a 46% chance that a job transition would result in lower pay. The bad news is for 3.5 million workers who quit their jobs in September alone. Demographics of low-wage workers span race, gender, and geography, but women and people of color are likely to earn lower. African Americans are 32% more likely to earn lower wages than Europeans, and 42% of Latinos. The largest group is retail salespeople, followed by information and records clerks. There are 2.9 million of those. Cooks and food preparation people, 2.6 million. Building cleaners, janitors, 2.5 million. Material movers, I guess that's haulers, 2.5, and food and beverage people, 2.4. I won't go much more into this study, but we'll have it on numbers, man. Let me move along here. And I guess we'll end up in Las Vegas, Nevada. Yeah. And see if we can get the Journal Review up here. This is by Sheila Johnson. Las Vegas passed its controversial homeless camp banning. It's by Sheila Johnson and Barika and Erickson. Anyway, the Las Vegas Review Journal. The council on Wednesday passed a controversial, this is Las Vegas Council, that will ban people from camping and sleeping in public areas downtown and in residential areas if there are free beds available at homeless shelters. On the new ordinance, violators could be charged with a misdemeanor crime, punishable up to 6 months in jail or a $1,000 fine, which they don't have. And it will go into effect on Sunday, though the criminal provision will be enforced next year in February. Carol Goodman made a passionate plea for action before the vote, lamenting how 20 years of talk since her husband Oscar was a mayor have led to no progress. This beginning seed to build something that will flourish. This is flawed, but it's a start. Vegas officials said the ban, approved by 5-2, is an effort to break an explosive encampment downtown and compel homeless individuals to accept help and seek shelter, not put them in jail. Camps cause public health and safety risks throughout the city, but opponents call it a tantamount to criminalizing the most vulnerable populations in favor of the business interests. The law ignores the roots of the problem and will be both costly and inhuman. This is the most disgusting and embarrassing policy I've seen, as Antoinette Magnus, the executive director of Battleborn Progress, a liberal group. The council was often meeting was contentious, with the mayor struggling at times to maintain control as protesters yelled out in both unison individually, leading to at least a handful of people being removed. Far more opponents and supporters addressed the policy, calling it a long-term regional solution, such as calling for the increase in affordable housing, boost of mental health services, substance treatments. City officials said they were working on long-term solutions. Now, they've been doing that for many, many years, despite funding and resource shortfalls. Some stated that encampments must be addressed immediately as they present the health problems. That's always the thing that the city attorney Jarvik argued that the criminal component of the law was the only way to enforce it. Authorities will have discretion on enforcing it. Service providers denounced the ordinance, asking council types to later vote to include them in the conversation. And Councilman Knudsen and Diaz were the two holdouts. Knudsen vowed to do more to address the issue, backing on his experience in the nonprofit sector. Diaz said she believed the city should first increase social services. The public, this is from Clark County, where the Vegas is. John Pyro, said it's inaccurate to suggest the building would not have fiscal impact, adding that it cost $170 per day to house an inmate at the detention center. The money, he said, would be better spent elsewhere. Other questions whether the bill might hurt vulnerable groups like veterans, LGBTQ youth, and working homeless. Pauline Lee said that distracted were ignoring a major clause in the ordinance. If shelters were full, it would not be enforced. Lee won a few dozen supporters. Anyway. Among the supporters, several downtown businesses such as the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce, the Fremont Street Expansion, Downtown Vegas Alliance. I imagine so. More than 100 critics of the bill, including progressive and faith leaders, they were all there. and it has drawn attention nationally. Nearly all the top Democratic presidential candidates have criticized the proposal. It faces possible legal hurdles too. Beyond legal questions, logistics and effectiveness of the ban has been called into question. There are roughly 2,000 beds available between the city and non-profit services on any given night in southern Nevada, according to accommodate more than 5,500 homeless people. Jarek said Wednesday the city was seeking to increase the number of beds available. Well, they better get on this. They don't have it at this point in time, period. Now, let me see if I can get this one last story in. Yeah, we'll have to go later. We'll finish this up with L.A. and some iconic housing involving the artistic community in downtown Los Angeles. We've been trying to get this up, and this is where we'll close it out for today's presentation. Her rent went from $1,426 to $4,493. Doomsday for the Santa Fe Arts Colony. This is in Los Angeles. This is by Matt Stromberg of the LA Times. This is on now. The Santa Fe Art Colony may set next to a recycling plant and a tow yard in an industrial zone that's in southeast of downtown, but for 30 years the former furniture manufacturing factory has been heaven for artists and an affordable place for intergenerational community to live. We are a haven for painters, printmakers, artists who aren't doing commercial shoots for cars of the fashion industry. That is from Lionel Paisley. She's the chair there of the Visual and Media Arts Department of Los Angeles City College and one of the residents. All that changed Friday when the rent increase planned by the new property owners, it usually it's simple rent provided by the Times, showed that a $680 rent for each of 5 units has risen from $1,822 to $2,146 depending on the unit. Multiple tenants who have been paying $978 are now looking at $2,000. The Miami-based development agency 15 Group brought the complex building in 2018 and notified many tenants that their rents would be raised significantly. I have nowhere to go. That's from Julie Arnoff, a painter who called the art colony home for 31 years. I'm praying it's going to work out, but I can't afford it. The art colony, Santa Fe Art Colony, was established in 1986 with public funds through the community redevelopment agency, allowing for adaptive reuse factory buildings into art studios. That happens in many cities, including Back Bay Area in Boston. The 30-year agreement set rent restriction that on 85% of the 257 units. That agreement expired in 2016, but because of the previous owner didn't notify tenants of the rent increase, the city enforced a stay to 2017. The 15 Group purchased it, and there we go, to raise the rents now from Chuck Fiesengo. I lived there for a decade, 10 years. I want to be here because of the fact that they are pressing artists, Vigo said. That lends itself to a certain kind of energy that you don't get in other places. Well, no doubt about it. The colony was established. Units were rented only to people who could prove their artistic bona fides. Well, I guess now it doesn't matter. You'd be a con artist and move in there. In fact, you probably would have to be. We serve not just a cultural function, but the arts are huge in the economy. That is Sylvania Tidewell, head of the Santa Fe Art Colony Tenants Association, whose rents had been $1,426. It's $4,000 and $4,493. Last year, artist residents boycotted a 15-group organized open studio event, and they said in an attempt to use their community as a real estate selling point, they see them cool the studios that eventually be yours. Anyway, this woman felt awful about it. Let me finish this article up here. Located near the borders of L.A. and Vernon, the complex with tapestry of brick was originally the C.B. Van Vossum furniture manufacturing company designed by John Montgomery Cooper in 1916. Cooper had 4 projects with historical designation: L.A., the Roxy Cinema downtown, the nomination based upon identification of important buildings. So let's see where this for many people, the plight of the Santa Fe art colonies residents echoes changes in LA's art district to the north. Artists transformed that neighborhood before high-end galleries, boutiques, cafes, and condos moved in. Many colony residents being pushed out would mean something greater than the loss of a home. We are the last spot to be able to hold on to that whole concept. This is Fees and Go said there. We as a group exist, and we want to hand it off to those that follow us. Well, this is unfortunate. Now, this would be a place where some of those billionaires and other entertainment people that make billions of dollars could be handy in, but we don't see that. On tomorrow, we'll have the polling of the week on the week that was. We'll also go to Charlie Cook, hopefully, and we'll have Caro. We'll have him in there and try to get some of our special programming out here we've been working on. And it's kind of interesting from doing these internet broadcasts. Usually in an election year, we get tired as the year goes down. Jerry and I used to talk about that, Jerry Pippin. But this year is the continuous thing. It's been continually at higher than normal decimals, signaling the noise. A lot of signal coming out, a lot of noise all coming at one time. Something we'll have to deal with in 2020 as we try to figure out how to do this and how to more effectively do it. But presenting information is presenting information. You do need to do some research. In these 30-second broadcasts that you see on national media, 1-minute broadcasts, or some expert coming in and say, well, study X says this, without ever name in the study, and sometimes they've brought this, etc. You do get a few details of the study. We try to deep dive, particularly on numbers, man. Hope it's not that boring. We're trying to get it less boring, as Doc Holliday used to say, and read from the teleprompter. Nonetheless, have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on the week that was. That will be on Saturday. We used to say Saturday morning, but sometimes it does appear up later on Saturday, but it will appear. And the Monday Morning Quarterback, all part of the Boston Red Network and WBRN Radio. You can find us on the iHeart mobile app, on the Spreaker mobile app, the Snitcher mobile app. We're all mobile these days. And at Google Podcasts. We need to check over at Apple. I know some of our work is at the Apple Podcast. We do not advertise Apple because it's a proprietary system. But we advise you to go to Google Podcasts. And we almost have finished an open source report. We'd hoped to have it early, but we'll get it out this weekend. Corridor, as we say. We call it here. Usually we do the Friday Java, the week that was, the Monday Morning Quarterback. They're all almost back to back. And Jerry and I used to do Sunday Politics. We always try to have a show. So we get 4 or 5 events out. And we have almost done. A memorial to the late John J. Connors, who represented the city of Detroit. We have that up, although some of the broadcasts there, we were trying to find the remarks by Reverend Jackson of Chicago, and we didn't find that, but we do have some of the people. Incidentally, Minister Louis Farrakhan was on the stage there. I don't think he spoke. We'll have to check that out. And our World Series program, it'll be on All About Sports. We'll get that out. Good day.